Oh my word, not another shocker! Aston has got a brand new team principal after all. But it's none of the people that we expected it was going to be, and nobody expected this guy. Although actually we really probably should have. Adrian Newey, yes that Adrian Newey, is now Aston Martin's team principal alongside his duties as managing technical partner, replacing the likes of Andy Cowell, who's shifting to a new role within the team. And that whole shortlist regarding Horner, Seidel and Binotto, oh, you can forget about that entirely, thank you very much, because this internal hiring is just absolutely wild. But yet at the same time, it's something that may have been in the making for about 4 decades at this point. All the things that Newey has learned that have been good and not so good about his other placements might be then coming to bear. And I don't think you need me to tell you that the reaction online has been a mixture of surprise, absolute incredulation, as well as a little bit of mild concern as to when is he going to have the time to design the car? But then also people knowingly nodding going, yeah, actually, it kind of makes sense. But then people going, oh god, this is almost as quick as Alpine changing things and personnel every other damn Sunday. But I guess this is just Newey going, well, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Or maybe something else, but we'll touch upon that later. So here is what Aston Martin said in an official statement for your consideration. Ahem. Andy Cowell and Adrian Newey have agreed to divide their responsibilities in order to focus on their individual strengths and expertise, ensuring organizational efficiency. Cowell will take on a new role as Chief Strategy Officer, using his unique experience to help optimize the technical partnership between the team, Honda, Aramco, and Valvoline. Adrian Newey will take on the role of team principal from 2026 and will be guiding the technical team, including the trackside operations of the car. These strategic changes are designed to ensure the leadership team is well prepared to play its collective strengths in 2026. Now, this is really important to note here, and I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding in the wider populace that this is not the case of Andy Cowell being completely sacked and ejected from the team. What's happened to him is the exact same thing that's happened to Mike Crack, and that he's just been moved sideways into a far less glamorous and not public-facing position. One thing I picked up upon based on that statement is that there's no mention as to who is going to be the CEO next. Because that was part of Cowell's remit too, team principal and CEO of the F1 team. The closest that we've got to is that maybe Papa Stroll will take up some more CEO-like duties for the time being, so you could think of this as the brand new Aston Martin Holy Trinity. Newey now controls the sporting and technical side, Cowell moves over to a quieter strategy-focused role, and Papa Stroll stays on the business end. Wisely, since Aston Martin's road-going division is still needing a pair of steady hands and a crippling amount of debt. But the real intrigue lies in what isn't being said. Because from that official release, they're reframing this whole thing next year as the team's glorious rebirth as a full Honda Works team. And seriously, you should not be underestimating that partnership. It is really a legitimately fascinating prospect. Honda ultimately building one of the best turbo hybrid power units of this entire generation cycle, right up there with the likes of Mercedes. And Newey is the guy who helped build a really dominant chassis around it and has been around the Red Bull mainframe and the beginning of their working relationship with Honda since day one. And he will be there at Aston Martin in a massive capacity, and then you might be wondering, well, why did Andy Cowell only last 14 months in the job? What was the point of that then? Well, I certainly think that he was there to lay down the foundations of a really impressive unit that knows power units through and through. Because I remember Toto Wolff saying, well, you got Andy Cowell, he was part of our Mercedes division, it was a very important part of our domination, it's an absolute genius move right there, I'm getting the vapors, Papa Stroll, you are such a madman, genius madman. Seriously, Toto really liked Andy. But it does seem like all the work that Andy has done has been wise, but Adrian's going to take it from here. And don't worry, we will touch upon what I think the drivers are going to reckon about this particular appointment. That's for darn sure, because, well, they're going to be driving the cars. And Adrian being right there, seeing how the cars are being implemented, they're going to have immediate feedback loops right there. For Alonso, this is both exciting and unforgiving. A Newey-centric team is exactly the kind of thing he's been chasing for years. But it also means his value will be judged more about pure pace and maybe less so about sentimentality and how he helps shape the car going forward. But yes, I do personally think that given Newey's background and desire to have control, the odds of Fernando staying if he really drops the ball next year might have actually lessened. And for Lance, it kind of cuts both ways. Yes, his seat is still protected by ownership, but a ruthless performance culture especially from Adrian, makes that protection more politically expensive, and the pressure could get so intense it might lead to him making more mistakes in a car, which might be right at the top. And seriously, there may be nowhere to hide here now that Adrian is in charge of even more stuff. I can't imagine Adrian is going to want to see the car that he helped design and get into production and then actually implement on the track, either in the wall or out in Q2 when they should both be in the higher end, ideally, of Q3. He is going to have more influence to say to Papa Stroll, look, Lance isn't cutting it, we need to do something, you can't let your heart rule your head, mate. That it's going to just cause a lot more pressure for Stroll, but who knows, this might see him rise to the occasion. About time, since he's been in the sport for nearly 10 years. And then for other drivers, I mean, do I really need to even say it? This is going to look even more attractive. Insanely attractive. Because he'll be designing the car and he will be there on the day. And if the car starts well, high-profile people like Verstappen and Leclerc might want to position themselves for a future move. So expect the Charles rumours to continue at pace, as well as maybe other names throwing their hat into the ring. Now back to Cowell. His new Chief Strategy Officer title strongly hints that he is no longer the CEO, it's just the press release chose to not really draw attention to it. And again, Aston Martin does have a habit of doing this kind of thing, and not just sacking people outright, but just moving them off into positions that don't attract as much attention. And it certainly helps that not many people have picked up on the fact that he might not be the CEO, or there's some kind of confusion about it. Many people are still reeling about the news that Newey is going to be the team principal, and this is such a big deal in his 40-year-plus history with Formula One. You know, maybe this was a long time coming. Andy Cowell may have seen the writing on the wall, as I showed you with that GrandPrix.com article I shared with you earlier this week, and in the original video where Horner was being speculated, where he joked about his future regarding those rumours. Maybe he knew that he had to just do some deflecting, and it really helped that Papa Stroll defended him publicly, because this is his grand plan too, you know. He wants to make sure that it is actually announced on their terms. And speaking of Papa Stroll, the statement stresses that he will continue to manage the business and corporate side of things. If they were simply separating the sporting boss from the business boss, Newey and Cowell respectively, you'd expect them to say so explicitly. Instead, they also choose to include Stroll in all of this. So therefore, I'm just going to have to get the foam of doubt out for this one, because I'm not entirely sure what's going on with Papa Stroll. He is the executive chairman. He is meant to be the grand poobah of the team. Is he going to become the brand new CEO as well? Or is he going to just do some caretaker roles, take some responsibilities, until they can find somebody else who can? A certain somebody who may be on a little bit of gardening leave. But then at the same time, you could just say, oh, it's just Lawrence wanting to tighten and control even more. Maybe he kind of even knows that Adrian will have even more power to put pressure on Lance, and therefore he needs something to counter. So what's Cowell's job going to be anyway? According to the statement, he's being put in charge of the long-term technical and partner integration with Honda as they begin operations in the next few weeks proper, when the power unit is used in anger for the first time in private testing come January, as well as working with their sponsors who provide fuel and lubrication, as they were mentioned in the press release as well. And they want to optimize those technical partnerships, so getting the likes of Cowell on board makes perfect sense, and his work will be a lot more gradual and far less frantic, and there'll be far less public-facing drama. Because you got to admit that even though the team has publicly said, and many other teams have been doing the same, that they've kind of given up on this year and then they're focusing on next year, having so many teams do that and providing minimal upgrades, it's still not a nice thing to see that Aston Martin are currently in 8th place at the moment, and them finishing 9th this year is still very much a possibility. And the last time that a team that Alonso was at, and they finished in 9th, was McLaren in 2017, and that was a very bad year. So maybe in that case, there could have easily been the opportunity to say, well, there may have been some friction caused by Newey and Cowell in that particular context. But for Newey, I still can't believe this. This is very, very unlike the guy in him thrusting himself into the spotlight like this, especially the last few years where you being the team principal, you get a lot more attention than you used to. Private and modestly presented man willingly putting himself out in the public face of the team. He's already arrived as managing technical partner with shares in the team and responsibility for the car. Now the team's bent over backwards and giving him even more power. He's designing the car and now the team's technical vision, and the one who calls the shot on how that car is developed and run trackside. And for everybody in the team, it's going to tell them that Adrian's word is absolute, almost as absolute as Papa Stroll's. And maybe that Stroll trusts Adrian enough to be able to do things that he actually can see eye to eye with the guy. I think you can probably tell that with the team principal gig being so public, you are going to be publicly held accountable if things go great or if they go not so great. You are very much putting yourself in the line of fire, Adrian. And yes, this is quite a surprise, and it's given Aston Martin a heck of a lot of attention. But as I touched upon at the beginning of the video, this is the 4th change of leadership in as many years. It's making Alpine going, wow, we're actually getting a little bit sluggish. Is there anyone else to fire? No? Oh, okay, right. Yeah, this is still a lot of upheaval, and it tells you that this has been going on for a while now. It was not fixed when Andy Cowell came in. I expected stability, since he doesn't seem to be a volatile figure, but I guess I was wrong. I don't know how heated it got behind the scenes, but the fact that we kept hearing rumours about tension mounting between the two men, Newey and Cowell, it does suggest maybe that there might have been some legs to all of those rumours after all, that after several engineers had left the team, as part of either a purge of Newey or Cowell not agreeing with that maybe all of these A players are not actually getting along as expected. That maybe Newey and Cardile, who is his technical deputy, are now deciding to run the show themselves. And that is a thing as well, that maybe Cardile out of all of this might be getting more responsibility, since he is the second to Adrian. But yeah, this is a total reset now. But the immediate effect for Aston Martin employees is that, thankfully, there'll be more clarity as to who is in charge. Before, you had a CEO and team principal who was an engine guy by background, working with a legendary designer who would spend most of his time locked away in his office, and then a chief trackside officer, Mike Crack, being around just to do his things trackside, and then Papa Stroll somewhere in the background. Who was in charge of the car, really? Was it Adrian's, or was it Andy's? Or was it Mike's, the guy who would be implementing Newey's designs on the circuit? This latest plan, though, thankfully reduces the load, and thinking, yeah, okay, it's Adrian's, no doubt. But we've got to remind ourselves that Newey has never been a team principal before. Or at least not to my recollection. But it certainly doesn't mean he has no experience whatsoever in how to handle team principals, because he has worked with so many high-profile teams. At Williams, at McLaren, at Red Bull. It's very notable experience and could easily be valuable if he's thinking, well, I've seen the ups and downs of all that, and I think I can make that work and make sure that doesn't happen to my team. He has been a key person at teams going as far as the early 90s with Williams, but he's also had a history of removing himself when things got completely untenable. Back in his days with Williams, the intent there for him was to be almost as influential as Frank Williams and his engineering sidekick Patrick Head. There were even clauses in his contract to allow Adrian to have some say in driver choice, and maybe where the team goes. But those were often ignored by Williams and Head. The Damon Hill saga proving to be the last straw, and why Newey jumped over to McLaren. Seriously, if you look through the entire history of Williams Grand Prix engineering, it is filled with so many stubborn choices, or ignoring people, or knee-jerk reactions, and treating the drivers like commodities. It made me think that them going under like that, they totally deserved it. Newey was granted more authority at McLaren. He even got to choose the colour of his own wall, much to the chagrin of Ron Dennis, who wanted everything grey and white and black. Maybe it was a tint of red, a little bit cheeky. But even that broke down too due to trust issues. And then I can't imagine the MP418, you know that one, the car that never raced and none of the drivers would touch with a 10-foot barge pole. That probably didn't help. And then, as we know, Red Bull came knocking, offering even more influence, but then that went sour in the midst of political turmoil, as well as losing impetus in the midst of constant bannings of his innovations, and then when Renault severely underdelivered and underinvested in 2014. It almost caused Adrian to quit the sport entirely. I can't say I blame him, because, yeah, he could build fantastic cars, but if they didn't have enough grunt, then you're not going to be winning races there, chum. And then all of the public hate toward Christian, yeah, he jumped ship because of that too. Which is making me think that maybe he'll want to take all the stuff that he learned, the mistakes of his superiors and colleagues, and make sure that that doesn't happen with him. Because he's left teams when things were blatantly ignored, or they just completely changed from the team that he signed up with, and he just felt like he wasn't really being paid attention to. With Williams, it was the promise of power and lack thereof, ultimately. McLaren, he had a little bit more, but he was butting heads with Dennis, and then the technical limitations made him go bye-bye. With Red Bull, he had the influence and the control and the freedom, but it just got completely toxic over there, and because of his timid, demure nature and him walking back things, he didn't have the will or the power to be able to change that and making people like them again. And at Aston Martin, all of those roadblocks are gone. He is in charge, and I'm quite certain that he'll be looking at what happened with Red Bull and Laura Mecky's taking in charge, a more technically engineered-minded person, and seeing the good that that can do, and thinking, yeah, I could do that too. He is in charge, and whatever he says goes, and Papa Stroll seems to be happy to watch his partner in crime do his thing whilst he counts the beans. And he could dictate how the public face of Aston Martin is conveyed to avoid the dissolving of goodwill that Red Bull suffered through. At the Green Team, he can take all that he's learned and package it in a way he sees is the antithesis of the failures that he's witnessed at such legacy teams. And it helps give him some credence that he might do a good job after all, since all the teams that he departed, due to the fact he grew weary of them, then had a bit of a lean spell, some longer than others. But still, he actually lacks having experience in that specific role. That cannot be ignored. Yeah, he thinks that he can make it work, but can he though? You would have to get your spanner out for that one, but you could actually close the aperture a little bit. Being in his mid-60s, he has a wealth of experience of all kinds of Formula One. But yet his main strengths coming from design and aerodynamics, people skills and people management when political turmoil can really be high, not being in the engineering department where you do need people management skills, but you're all doing the same thing, you have a common understanding and you do have the idea of bodging something and mucking in, far less so when there's a lot more money involved as well as prestige. You know, the Piranha Club. And the statement tries to soften the worries of fans and others by stressing that he is taking on this additional role rather than moving away from the technical base that he was employed for. But the practical reality is that his time and attention are finite. Everything now has to run perfectly so as to avoid Newey not firing on all cylinders or maybe causing confusion and delay. And then again, there is that lingering CEO question. There has been, as of now, no successor named, or any confirmation that Cowell actually gets to keep the title. It's all leaving the door open for someone to step in later, say, one Christian Horner. I know that some of you may be getting sick and tired and saying, Law, Papa Stroll has said he's not going to be doing any financial contributions whatsoever to his team. He's not the team principal now, Adrian is. Well, what can he possibly do? Well, you gotta remember, he was also the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Red Bull Racing. So therefore, those whispers of him joining that team once his gardening leave is over in the summer of 2026 will persist, I tell you. In theory, Aston could do that, make him the CEO and Adrian is the team principal, Christian overseeing the wider business whilst Newey runs the sporting side. You'd then see Cowell's influence become less grandiose, and the new three-layer split would be the Papa signing off on the big decisions, Horner as the CEO running the whole organisation under the Canadians' edict, and then Newey in charge of car performance and race operations. The potential friction is obvious though, don't get me wrong, and it makes me think that maybe this trinity would not last long because, as I touched upon earlier, Newey is 66 years old, Papa Stroll is also 66 years old, Christian Horner, 14 years their junior. He can outlast them by just existing. That maybe come time where Newey might decide that if this regulation cycle is not something that he particularly likes, or he thinks that maybe the team principal role wasn't as good as he thought it would be, then he might scale things back again. Papa Stroll, same thing. Once he approaches 70, he may decide to wind things down or retire, making good on all of the stuff that he's been able to, accrue. The experience, the wealth especially, as well as all the connections. Probably taking on some kind of role of chairman emeritus or something like that, a ceremonial role. But it does leave the door open for maybe Christian to snatch power come 2031 or something like that, the brand new regulation cycle. We may see, once again, him becoming the team principal and the CEO of Aston Martin. And then, of course, you could consider that maybe Adrian Newey might not be the full-term team principal. Maybe he's just taking on this job as a temporary measure to fill in the time before Horner can legally arrive next summer. Maybe this job will mean that he can ensure that the AMR26, his car, is properly implemented during the flyaway races before they head for the European leg. And then if it doesn't, then if Horner was ensconced within Aston Martin, this particular change in leadership will eventually change. It will happen. It just may take a little bit longer. Thanks to age. And the fact that Horner is used to being the top banana, the biggest sporting decision maker of the entire organisation. Yeah, being the CEO would be nice, but he also will remember being the team principal and effectively being in charge of the whole widget. And then Dietrich Mateschitz basically giving him the entire freedom in which to do so, the Thai side of the business doing so up until the very last minute, and Salzburg not really taking much of an initiative, with Mateschitz in charge of that at the time before 2022, thinking, oh no, Christian is doing great, why on earth would I want to change him? Oliver Hoffman comes in, and then it's a lot more corporate, baby. And he would also have to deal with the fact that Adrian would have the final say on technical and race matters. This plan would only work if Horner could actually accept that, and that his brief would be related to sponsors, the facilities, the staffing, the big picture politics, and leaving the trackside stuff to somebody else. It could be a massive boon and a sponsor magnet since, well, let's not forget the Oracle Red Bull deal. That was all Christian. And that the question mark regarding the civil case against him now is no longer a thing. but it requires massive mutual trust and very clear lines in the sand. And in F1, I think you can probably tell, ego management is very much a thing. It is a real thing. If Horner comes in like this and is expected to be a part of an entire widget instead of being the main component, and that Adrian is technically his equal or even superior because he is the managing technical partner too, then he is just going to have to play ball and just wait out the clock, perhaps. That he should be even grateful he's even gotten back into a team with this much prestige. Or at least prestige that is up and coming. I mean, the facilities are absolutely first rate. But yeah, that is for later. But you are still wondering, why is this even a thing and where is this actually going to go? Adrian Newey, this is both obvious and yet not obvious at the same time. That maybe Aston Martin's just doubling down on him, making him the nucleus of next year's project while easing Cowell into a specialist post. A cultural reset, an engineering first team with a quiet, ruthless leader at its core. If it works, Aston finally escapes the almost there label. If not, the financial risk is brutal. Stroll's empire is already propped up by investor confidence and image value, not, as we see with Aston Martin Lagonda, profit. If the campaign fails next year, it could cause some serious monetary harm for all concerned. The investors will not like that one bit, because you brought in one of the most successful technical guys in, you make him the team leader, and you still can't convert. You still can't show progress. What do you have to do, Papa Stroll, to make this really work? And then all eyes again will be on who needs to change or what needs to change first. Lance. So yes, this to me feels like a bet the farm moment in bringing in someone like Adrian instead of hiring from outside, because, I mean, all the stuff they've got going for them, there would be many people who would be very interested in taking up that role. But clearly, they believe in Newey. We barely scratched the surface with this. He technically won't be starting his job until the new year. Andy Cowell will be around for Qatar and Abu Dhabi. And Horner is still around, watching, waiting, commiserating with Andy. Yeah, oh, this is wild, man. And what's also watching and waiting is this video, which you can then go on to watch. I really do think you'll enjoy it. I'll see you over there.